For our treaty walk assignment, we did Government House. For anyone not familiar with the Government House in Regina, here are the basics. The Government House was built in 1891 and served as the official residence and office of the Lieutenant Governor until 1945. The Lieutenant Governor is the Queen's representative for Saskatchewan. In 1945, Government House was leased to the Department of Veterans Affairs as a convalescent home until 1957. In 1958 to 1977, the house was used as a center for adult education and became known as Saskatchewan House. Restoration on Government House started in 1978 and it opened as a museum in 1980. The office of the Lieutenant Governor did not return to the House until 1984 and currently occupies the north wing of the House. Now, what does a Lieutenant Governor do? Originally, the Lieutenant Governor of the Northwest Territories, the Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan, technically is the highest representative of the Crown and the royal family and has duties related to provincial appointments. If looked at from a treaty lens, the Lieutenant Governor represents not the Canadian government, but the British government, and infers the role of Canada as a colony of Great Britain, and that Canada still owes a duty there, even if it's largely ceremonial. By contrast, the First Nations and Métis groups in Saskatchewan don't have a similar representative who gets their own special house and ceremonial roles. The present Government House was constructed between 1889 to 1891, immediately east of the old Government House, built in 1883. Its architectural design was in fact a composite of several different styles popular during the late Victorian period. It was built on a grand scale because of the federal government's desire to have an imposing symbol of its authority in the Northwest Territories. Canadian imperialists felt that the Northwest was to deliver the British Empire into the 20th century. Residents like Government House, which housed the representative of Her Majesty the Queen, should be built to represent the grandeur of the British Empire. As its completion in 1891, Government House was by far the most advanced dwelling in the Northwest Territories. It boasted running water, which was pumped from a well in the basement to a collection tank situated in the attic and then fed by gravity throughout the house. Sewage was directed from indoor flush toilets to a brick cesspool in the garden area. It cost $50,000 at the time, which in 2022 dollars is roughly $1.55 million. The house, although almost 4 kilometers from the town, was connected to Regina's telephone system. The Regina Lighting Company provided electricity to the property, and the home was heated by a series of heated coils and warm air from the furnace. Think about what it would be like to live in Saskatchewan as a First Nations or Métis person and see the effort made to support this one house, as well as to the settler population, and what that might say to them about who truly owned the land. If you visit the Government House and go on the tour, you'll see a lovely house maintained in the late Victorian or early Edwardian style and learn fun details about the families that lived there prior to World War II, when the house's furniture was largely sold off and due to wartime austerity measures, and it became a convalescent home for veterans. There's talk of a pet monkey who swung from the chandeliers, displays of the silverware, and opulent dinner parties that were held there, and even the usual stories of a ghost roaming the halls that seems to be required of any old Victorian museum. What's missing are the real ghosts, the people whose land was stolen and whose treaties haven't been honored, and most fundamentally, who died unmarked and unremembered by anyone associated with this house because they had the audacity to be here first. What does it mean to look at a building like Government House through a treaty lens? What are we trying to see or show? It's possible to walk past Government House and admire it, think it looks beautiful, or even feel glad that there's some sort of real history available in a province only a little over a century old. This building gives an audience the same kind of feel that watching a heritage period drama like Downton Abbey might. A reminder of a bygone and romanticized era that we yearn for a little even while remaining in modernity. We all want a nice past, bloodless and free of class struggle or the ugliness of reality. A world where you can have high tea in the home of the lieutenant governor and never have to question why having a lieutenant governor was necessary, what it meant to have a representative of the British royal crown in a country an ocean away that they acquired by not following through on their promises and contracts. This manor house, seemingly lifted directly out of an English lord's estate, is a visible symbol of British colonial power in the area. The care and detail of the home, and the maintenance of it, is not necessarily wrong in a vacuum, but the choice to say, the government here is British and will reflect a British attitude and British supremacy over the land is very telling. There's no reflection of Canada's origins, or even the Canada that was contemporary when it was built in this house. There's no acknowledgement of Treaty 4 that established that the Crown even had the right to claim this land. This is erasure of true Canadian history. If anyone needs a reminder of what kind of history was going on directly leading up to the original government house being built, the Cypress Hills Massacre had happened in 1873, which led to the Northwest Mounted Police becoming a larger presence in the territories. Treaty 4, 5, and 6 were signed shortly after, and then in 1879, the Crown began forcing First Nations people onto reserve land, using the disappearance of the buffalo as a reason to clear large swaths of land for coming railroad expansions and settlers. The Canadian government refused to recognize the loss of the buffalo as a general famine, which would have required them to act as per Treaty 6, because keeping the First Nations people in a state of famine and starvation made them easier to manage. The Cree uprisings of 1884 and 1885 and the Métis resistance of 1885 plunged the Saskatchewan district of the Northwest Territories into turmoil, ending in armed conflict and open rebellion against the Dominion government. The Métis eventually lost any chance of independence or nationhood. Both Big Bear and Poundmaker surrendered and received prison sentences. The Cree uprisings of 1884 and 1885 and the Métis resistance of 1885 plunged the Saskatchewan district of the Northwest Territories into turmoil, ending in armed conflict and open rebellion against the Dominion government. And armed resistance in Saskatchewan died down. Imagine watching your nation lose the right to their own land, seeing your leaders killed or imprisoned and being driven away from your ancestral lands, and then seeing this building being built. This building that looked nothing like anything your people would build. That was a stark reminder of everything you'd literally just lost. Not just everything, but everyone. And the person who lived in that house was the embodiment of the government who took the land from you to begin with, and the government who refused to honor their bound promises to your people, who then died because of it. Look around at the land that encircles this house and the incredibly manicured lawns, the edifice of this building, and ask yourself, what does this building say today? From 1999 to 2011, an expansion project revamped the building, even redesigning 8.5 acres of land to recreate an Edwardian garden that had originally been designed during the initial building of the house. The cost of the restoration is not easily available anywhere on the official site or government press releases, but comparative restorations were in the tens of millions, depending on the property and relative repairs needed. The Visitors Center cost $4.1 million, but that does not make up the totality of the restoration. If you walked a couple of blocks in any direction, what kind of funding decisions get made for those neighborhoods and who lives there? What does it say about the kind of history we want people to remember and what we want people who visit Regina to think of our city?